if you work for an international organization, INGO, UN. Thank you. And then lastly, hands up if you work for a donor or a grant maker. Okay, so we have a few. Great. So I think this is, I know there are other people, but this is where we want to get a sense of who's in the room. And then Matt, I also want to get a sense of your interaction with research. So can you put your hands up if you do research yourself? Okay.
That's my microphone.
And then if you use research in your day-to-day role or right. Okay. It's very reassuring. A lot of people that use research and implement research, and see if you fund others to do research. Okay, thanks. So we've got a nice mixture. On our panel, we also have a mixture of those different 3 questions that we asked you. So I think you can already tell what are the different approaches that we're trying to explore here as part of this topic. I think maybe for those online, there might be a slight delay for answering the questions, but the form is coming. So please do answer that once the link is online. Otherwise, I am going to go and introduce the panelists. So online we have, you can see in the video for those in the room, we have Umut who's joining us remotely. Unfortunately, Umut couldn't be here in person. He's based in Turkey. Umut is a general coordinator for Chaos GL Association. It's an organization that focuses on LGBTQI+ rights in Turkey, and he has a background in social work. After the Hatay earthquake, he began working in essentially humanitarian work, specifically in the earthquake zone with Ankara Lubunya Earthquake Solidarity. And in 2024, the HLA partnered with Chaos, who led a piece of research that was called Humanitarian Aid Through a Queer Lens, LGBTQI+, and Refugee Rights in Crisis. Then here in the room, we have Kai Hopkins at the end, who's a senior development and humanitarian leader with over 20 years experience driving social change. Currently, Kai's the head of research initiatives at ELRA, and he oversees a portfolio delivering impactful innovation and research in humanitarian contexts. Kai has significant experience in the humanitarian sector, having led major humanitarian programs in Ukraine, Afghanistan, and other crisis settings. And then lastly, but not least, we have Mariana, to my right, who's the CEO and co-founder of Open Space Works, Ukraine, which is a Ukraine women-led organization working at the intersection of humanitarian action, community development, social cohesion, and civil society strengthening. She's led research and evaluations on localization, women and youth-led initiatives, and civil society resilience, amongst many other topics. But as you can see, we're really trying to make sure that we have a balance here in the panel of local organizations that have implemented research with INGOs and within the humanitarian sector, of a grant funder. So we're able to get a little bit of the perspective of funding within this. And then I will be breaking my role a little bit as chair for a few questions so that we have the INGO perspective for a few questions. So, okay, without further ado, also because you're probably a bit fed up of my voice by now, we can start with the questions. So my first question is to Mariana and Kai in the room. So what do you see as the added value of locally led research as opposed to, let's say, research led and designed by Western institutions? So I'll ask Kai to start and then we'll go to Mariana.
Thank you, Tamara. What's nice actually is that while I'm representing the funders on the panel, there are other funders in the room. So we can perhaps share any of the complaints that come out from the audience. Let's start by really clarifying what we mean by locally led. And for me, It really is recognizing the whole spectrum of what research involves. So starting with conceptualization, design, implementation, yes, but also using research ultimately. So that's our starting point. And I think the value and the rationale behind it sits broadly in two buckets. Firstly, the ethical, and secondly, the practical. So it is the right thing to do, I think, morally, to have locally led research. People who are closest to the context should play leading roles in understanding the situation, the context, better understanding challenges and potential solutions. So it is the right thing to do. Moreover, it is the smart thing to do. If you want to walk away with something that's easy to remember, it is the right thing, it is the bright thing. So it is the bright thing to do. It makes sense. It results in better quality research, more relevant research, research that is going to have greater likelihood of leading to some sort of change or uptake. So it just makes sense. And just to kind of emphasize how we conceptualize locally led throughout the research cycle, we're also, as a funder, trying to support local organizations to think about their role in how to use data. And so some of the work that we've been doing recently, yes, acknowledging their role in designing the research and implementing it, but then also what is their role in ensuring uptake of research? So we're really trying to sit across that whole spectrum of research action. So to summarize, the bright thing and the right thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Kai. I think that's exactly what or where I want to start or jump in. But also, you mentioned that local researchers are those who are on the front line of the research and know the context better. But I want also to emphasize that what makes locally led research important is not just our proximity to the people and to the crisis. It's also because we have very different relationship with the knowledge we produce. So we are not only there when we do the data collection or go into the field. We are there when we imagine the research, imagine why the topic is important. We are there when we design or co-design the research, but also we are there when the research is actually used and is producing results. Researchers who are coming from outside to do the research, they stop somewhere with producing the report and usually do not get back to the communities and not closing the loops of feedbacks, not asking the communities, how are you with those results that you receive and the report. At Open Space, we try to do what we call emancipatory research. It means that we go to the community before the actual design is there and ask communities to co-design what questions they want to tackle in the research, what are the methods they are ready to engage with, and then how they also want and envision how they can use the results and how the advocacy can be done. I'm happy we also have Umut on the panel because we, and my organizations, we are mostly the researchers, yes, but we closely engage with activists like Umut who actually can say what makes sense in terms of doing the research. The other thing, and I also want to refer here to the ethics, is that we also not only ask questions, but we also know what questions do we ask and how those questions can affect the community, both good and bad. So what effects, what re-traumatization, what positive encouragement are those questions we are asking to communities can do. So all this participation, emancipation is not something that is, like often treated by external researchers as add-ons and added values. That's part of our methodology. That's something that we just can't do differently because we as well will stay with the communities for the longer run and will perceive the effects of the questions we asked in the long run for the people with whom we are talking.
Thank you. Thanks, Kai. And Marianne, and I think it's really interesting that you're bringing up, I guess, Kai, the moral and ethical dynamic of terms of you as a funder. And I think we would very much feel that as an INGO, in that there really is an ethical and a moral dynamic. And then, Mariana, it's really interesting that you're bringing up the participation and emancipatory aspect. My background has been largely in participation, and it is something we struggle to do really well. And I think it's really interesting that you're bringing up that actually, as local actors in this space, this is something that's much easier and much more, something that you can do much more relevant, I think, and in a way that's in dialogue with communities in a way that we actually do often struggle to do. Great, thanks. So the next question is, so it's a question actually to all of our panelists, but from a slightly different angle to each person. So this question is on what challenges do you currently face or observe when it comes to implementing or supporting locally led research, essentially where the research agenda is led by the local actor. And so I'd like to start with Umut online. And if you can speak essentially from the perspective of a local organization trying to implement research.
Hello everyone. So I will be doing the
Umut, can you hear us okay?
Yes, we can hear. This is
We
the
can't.
start. Can't you hear us?
Umut, just so you know, we can't hear you in the room. So maybe, does someone mind asking one of the tech people to join? Umut, sorry, I'll just start with Mariana while we try and figure out the mic issue with you, if that's okay. So I'll come back to you in a few minutes.
Like volume on, you can hear him.
Do we want to try and see? Sorry, Umut, we're just going to see.
Okay, can you hear us now?
We're just going to see if we can hear you through the computer mic. Do you mind speaking?
Yes, now I'm speaking. Can you hear us?
Is that okay for the room? Okay, great.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
So this is Yıldızlar. I will be doing the translation. There is an echo there. Shall we go on?
Yes, please go on.
Yeah, start please, Umut.
İnsani yardım alanında aslında en temel sıkıntı insani yardım alanının bir kriz alanı olması ve hükümetlerin krizi kriminal etme çabası ki uluslararası işbirlikleri söz konusu olduğunda da özellikle Türkiye gibi ülkelerde kriminasyon daha fazla olabiliyor. Araştırma da aslında en temelde uluslararası donörlerle dönem dönem sıkıntı yaşayabiliyoruz. Yereldeki örgütleri taşeronmuş gibi davranıyor ve aslında yereğin ihtiyacını öğrenmeye dönük yereldeki işbirliği onu güçlendirecekken kendi isteği ve öncelikleri söz konusu olduğunda yereğin önceliklerini ya da yereldeki aktörün önceliklerini göz ardı edebiliyor. Bu da aslında doğrudan araştırmayı da olumsuz yönde etkileyebiliyor.
Oradan ilerlemiyorsun böyle.
Evet, oradan ilerlesem.
So one of the main issues about the humanitarian sector is that the government's efforts to criminalize the whole sector during the crisis periods, which was a very important issue for us too. And in the humanitarian sector, activities implemented at the local level are often shaped through relationships that resemble a form of subcontracting with large international organizations. So this subcontracting relation is very problematic in that sense. The international actors frequently arrive in the field with some predetermined decisions about what should be done and how it should be implemented. So this approach can lead to intervention models that fail to adequately account for local needs, existing problems, and the broader social context.
Devam edeyim. Uluslararası örgütlerin kendi işte politikaları var ama Türkiye gibi özellikle yerel örgütlerinde kendi tabi olduğu mevzuat var ve bu mevzuatın getirdiği sınırcılıklar var. İkinci sayfa. Araştırmayı yapan insani yardım örgütü aslında bunları göz önünde bulundurarak yerel örgütlerle işbirliği yapmasında fayda var. Yereldeki örgütlerin insani yardım alanındaki çalışmalarını destekleyen çalışmalar söz konusu olduğunda yerel örgütler uluslararası insani yardım örgütleriyle yerel mevzuat ya da otoriteler arasında sıkışıp kalabiliyor. Hani bunun olmaması için aslında yerel örgütlerin esnekliği tanıyacak şekilde bir ilişki kurmak gerekiyor.
So local organizations frequently find themselves caught between international funding and international funding structures and domestic regulatory pressures. In some cases, this dynamic can turn into a struggle for institutional survival, which may negatively affect partnerships between local and international actors. For example, local organizations can face accusations of acting as foreign agents, and government authorities may question why certain activities are being reported or may fail to understand the purpose of documenting particular issues. These dynamics create additional risks for organizations engaged in research and advocacy work. And in this environment, humanitarian organizations should adopt greater flexibility when developing research proposals and budgets, particularly by taking into account the legal frameworks and regulatory environments in which local organizations operate. Tamamdır bu. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Umut. I hope in the room you were able to hear a little bit of that. I know the sound wasn't great. Umut, we are going to try and work on the sound for your next question, but thank you so much. I'm now going to hand over to Mariana for the same question.
Yeah, I completely support what Umut said, and it feels like that's relevant throughout different contexts. I will just add to that a couple of things from our experience. So working in Ukraine, I think the most obvious challenge would be that we face the same security challenges that communities that we research, and the same challenges related to keeping to the timeline and taking the decisions related to our field work, protecting the researchers, enumerators, people working with the communities in the field. And one thing to highlight here probably is that the concept of duty of care is already pretty much well established towards local humanitarians and humanitarian workers, but that's something that is not covering the local researchers who are often, as Umut already said, they often act as local consultants with the types of contracts and expectations for deliverables which are not really embedding the reality that we are working in, so not really reflecting to the security constraints, to the blackouts, to the changes, or potential changes in the deadlines. The other thing maybe that I wanted to highlight is are those epistemological frameworks with which external partners, international organizations, donors are coming to do research and support research in countries they are working. So everything related to the humanitarian jargon, to the concepts of nexus, early recovery, even like who are humanitarian workers, that's something that is clashing the reality. For example, we did the research together with HLA on women-led organizations in humanitarian response in Ukraine. And our respondents who did amazing humanitarian work, they never identified themselves as humanitarians. They were community leaders, human rights workers, but never perceived themselves as humanitarians. So those are the challenges we are facing also from and I don't even mention what Tamara mentioned, so the expectations towards what is meant rigorous research, what is meant reliable data, what is meant reliable methodology. And maybe the final thing that I wanted to mention is Yeah, the access to resources and institutional stability for organizations that are working in the countries. So resources, usually we struggle with that. The resources available for local research are not of the same amount available for international research. So then we face that we actually can sustain our work for the long run and build research in a way that it also results in changes in the countries. We'll stop here and pass to Kai to give another perspective.
Thank you. I think from a funder's perspective, there are two main areas of challenges. One which is actually quite real, and one that is a perceived set of challenges that I think we need to do better collectively to overcome. So let's start there. I think it is assumed, often wrongly, that it is quicker and easier to work with global international research organizations, that they will pass due diligence easier, that payments will be easier, that communications will be easier, that methods will perhaps be more in line with what we were expecting. And I think collectively as funders, we need to do better on that, because those aren't good enough, and they're also just not the case from our experience. I think relatedly, one challenge that we see that perpetuates this misconception of what it is to work with local organizations is that when local organizations have been involved and led research, their work isn't properly recognized. And so this cycle continues. It becomes very easy to fall into the trap of believing these misconceptions. So that's one. The other one, which I think is a little bit more real to us, is that while we really do support locally led research, we still see that there is value and a role to play for international organizations. So for us, it's really more about how do we create good, robust, and equitable research partnerships that bring together different organizations that can deliver different value within that. And partnerships are hard, so there's that well-known proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Good humanitarian research is about going far, and that requires partnerships. And so that is difficult, and our role within that is also difficult. I can talk in a minute a little bit about how we try to address that, but it's not either or. It's about bringing together the right people to deliver value in the right way. And that, when working with people and working with multiple organizations, that can be difficult.
Thanks, Kai. I think you can already hear some of the themes that are coming up around the need for more flexibility, not only from a moral perspective or it's the right thing to do, but actually genuine challenges that local organizations face. So whether it's what Umut was talking about, being caught between, I guess, international funders and organizations and domestic regulations, and what the challenges that creates for a local organization, or whether it is about actually needing to take into account these legal frameworks in a country that maybe isn't being considered as part of the research implementation in the first place. Or as Mariana said, around the security situation, or even the language that's used, like what's considered to be humanitarian, what are we missing by not actually having a broader understanding around this language, and who are we missing by doing that? And I think maybe to Kai's point around actually it's not necessarily quicker or easier to always work with an international organization. I think we've experienced that with the HLA as well, around actually some of the work that we've done with local organizations has been much simpler than it would have been with INGO. So I definitely echo that. And I think your second point around the value of international organizations in this space maybe allow me to break my role a little bit as the chair to speak a bit about our experience with the HLA. I think this actually speaks to one of the key challenges that we're trying to grapple with at the moment. And it really is like, how do you find that balance between identifying where can we add value add and where actually do we have a role in this space? And then actually making sure we don't slip accidentally into perpetuating that power dynamic. And I think that is something we're really trying to be quite aware of. And we have tried to be in the past, but I think it requires us to be quite reflective, and it really requires us to be very intentional. So an example might be in the past with some of our research that we've done with local organizations, they would like some support on methodology and approaches. And I think that's a really interesting one for us, because actually, where do you do it in the right way, where it's maybe a bit of a coaching or mentoring approach, but actually you're bringing out the best or the methods that local organizations would use, making sure that we're really taking that approach where it's a back role, where you're really trying to bring out what a local organization feels is the right methods or approaches, rather than unintentionally slipping into that space where you're like, this is the right way to do it. And I think that's been one that we've really grappled with and tested in the past. And maybe honestly, just a challenge also is, I mean, INGO ways of working are quite complex. And I think we all can, those of us that work for INGOs, this is a real barrier sometimes for local organizations. Some of the steps that we need to go through are just really difficult for local organizations. So again, a space that we've been trying to work in is like, can we negotiate that? How do you work within the system to try and make it a little bit easier for a local organization that's trying to partner with us, but also make it genuinely equitable. So I think those are the things that we have been reflecting on, and their challenges that we've faced as an INGO that's trying to really enable locally led research. Great. So I'll go on to the next question. So we've spoken a little bit about problems. I did say at the beginning we didn't just want to talk about problems and challenges. So the next question is on solutions, workarounds. So I guess I'll start maybe with Mariana. But yeah, what solutions or workarounds have you seen or experienced personally that could try and address some of the challenges that you spoke to earlier?
Yeah, well, I will start with the solution regarding resources, and speaking broadly, not only regarding funding, but also the time that we design for research. So here I would say that one of the solutions would be deliberately plan for local organizations and communities to be engaged into the research co-design, and that requires time. That requires much more time when we have the research designed somewhere in cabinets and then bringing down to the local partners or to the communities. So deliberately having more time for all these discussions and making communities also understand what is the research about, and feeding in their input regarding the potential use of the research would be one of the ways we could move forward. The other solution which we actually experienced was the HLA, which I suppose was not deliberately planned in the way how HLA was working with us and other partners, is facilitating or building connections with local researchers globally from different contexts. That was and is extremely beneficial for us as Ukrainian organization to learn from organizations and researchers like UMUT in different contexts, but also to build connections, for example, with researchers broader in Eastern Europe, which we did in our partnership with HLA. So we established quite good relationships with organizations in Poland that enriched both our ability to advocate, but also our ability to actually do the research in a more context relevant way, looking not only on Ukraine, but on the region broadly and globally on the sector of humanitarian research. And maybe the final thing, which echoes what Kai mentioned in terms of the challenges, is support to building research ecosystems with cooperative culture in the countries. So trying not to encourage this wild jungle of competitiveness between researchers, but really encouraging partnerships with different kinds of organizations, which can also respond to another challenge that was not mentioned yet, but what exists in contexts like Ukraine, the research fatigue, where every organization, local or international, is doing its own research, needs assessment, feasibility study, final evaluation, impact evaluation, and all other of the researches. And then at the end, you're coming to the community and everyone is like fed up with the questionnaires, focus group discussions, and workshops. So building this ecosystem and networks where you can easily check with colleagues which research is right now in progress or what is planned to be research would be really very helpful. And that is based on the knowledge we also had with our Polish colleagues in the HLA program when they did a research which was done by another international organization at the same time on the same topic and released almost at the same time. So yeah, those knowledge flows and exchanges, that's something that we all need to be better on exchanging what we are doing as researchers.
Thanks, Mariana. And Umut, I really hope the sound is going to work, but over to you if you could speak to some of your solutions or workarounds that you've seen work around the challenges that you mentioned earlier.
Mariana, teşekkür ederiz. Araştırma öncelikle insani yardım alanında öncelikli bir alan olarak görülmüyor. Ve hani kriz odaklı ve çözüm odaklı ilerleme eğilimi var. Bu da aslında özellikle yerel insan hakkı, insani yardım alanında çalışan örgütlerin kapasitesinin gelişmesinin önünde bir engele dönüşebiliyor. Bunun ayrıca hani destekleniyor olması ve desteklendiğinin özellikle uluslararası donörler tarafından belirtiliyor olması önemli. Ee, Özellikle Türkiye gibi insani yardım krizlerinin sürekli yoğun olarak yaşandığı ülkelerde de ve sürekli mobilize olmak zorunda insani yardım örgütleri. Doğal olarak krizlerle uğraşıp mobil bir durumda olduğunuzda da araştırmaya, izleme ve değerlendirmeye zaman ayıramayabiliyorsunuz. O yüzden örgütlerin kurumsal olarak destekleniyor olması bu işlevlerini yerine getirmesi için önemli olabilir. Bir de insani yardım alanında aslında araştırma ve kriz sonrası izleme faaliyeti için krizlerin hızlı bir şekilde çözüldüğü ya da olağan süre içerisinde çözülmüş olması bekleniyor. Ama işte Türkiye'de halen Hatay depreminin sonrası insanlar konteynerlerde yaşıyorlar ve aslında konteynerde yaşama süreci işte 6 aylık bir zaman diliminden belirlenirken şu anda üçüncü senesi bitti. Onun şeyi var. Bir taraftan da Türkiye'nin içinde bulunduğu coğrafya sürekli krizlerin olduğu bir coğrafya. İşte eee Hatay depreminin olduğu sırada Ukrayna'da savaş başladı. Hatay depremi oldu. Sonrasında Gazze ve işte son bir iki haftadır da İran'a yönelik savaş süreci krizleriyle uğraşıyoruz ve aslında bütün bu alanda çalışan insani yardım örgütleri de bu krizlerle baş etmek zorunda kalıyor. Burada olmayan ekstra bir şey de varmış zaten. İnsani yardım alanındaki bazı sorunlarda devletler tarafından ulusal güvenlik meselesi olarak algılanabiliyor. Bu da o alana insani yardımı nasıl götüreceğinizi de ilişkinizi de belirlediği gibi nasıl araştırma yapacağınızı da ya da yapamayacağınızı da belirleyebiliyor. Ve bu noktada uluslararası kurumlar da, insani yardım alanında çalışan uluslararası kurumlar da, çatı örgütler de insani yardımın insani boyutunu göz ardı edebiliyorlar. Bunun içinde en
Sen
temel
devamını da söyle, ben
tam
toparlayacağım.
yereldeki yapılacak araştırmalar için açık çağrılar hazırlanabilir. İnsani yardım alanında yapılmak istenen akademik çalışmalar desteklenebilir. Ve yerel örgütlerin ihtiyacı doğrultusunda esnek bütçeler yaratılabilir bir taraftan. Diğer taraftan da aslında uluslararası örgütlerin yerellerle kuracağı ilişki insani yardım meselesinde daha yerelleşmesini sağlayabilir.
Yine okumadım.
Evet, çünkü değiştirdim.
Like before coming into solution, maybe just a reminder about some challenges we didn't mention in the first round. One of the key challenges is that international organizations often approach research not through a genuine collaboration, but through externally designed projects. And this limits the development of research capacity within humanitarian and civil society organizations. Like in context of such as Turkey, where humanitarian actors are constantly mobilized around ongoing crisis, organizations often struggle to allocate time and resources for research, monitoring, and evaluation, or even reporting. So, one of the solutions can be institutional core support to local NGOs to increase their capacity to intervene to humanitarian crisis. The second is humanitarian crises rarely resolve quickly. In Turkey, the humanitarian agenda has long been shaped by mass displacement following the Syrian war. Since then, the field has also faced new crises, including the war in Ukraine and the earthquakes centered in Hatay and the wars affecting Gaza and later Iran. As one crisis continues, new crises emerge before the previous ones are resolved. And additionally, certain humanitarian issues or research topics may become framed as a national or international security concern, which can make conducting research even more difficult. So, the solution for this to be some separate prioritized research projects to map the field, also to look into the needs of the local NGOs, to have to support them, also have to increase our capacity to actually react when the crisis happens. The third solution can be shifting research funding and decision making power to some local actors. To strengthen locally led research, open calls for research proposals could be developed specifically for local organizations. Such calls would enable local actors to define research priorities and identify pressing needs within the humanitarian sector. By transferring both research funding and decision making power to local actors, it becomes possible to develop research agendas that more accurately reflect the realities on the ground while simultaneously strengthening the capacity of local organizations.
Bir şeyle ilgili mi? Hani
Söyle.
Gazze meselesini, yani Gazze'de yaşananları düşündüğümüzde uluslararası kurumların, devletlerin bile sorunu görmezden geldiği, oradaki işte soykırımı ya da soykırıma varan ihlalleri yokmuş gibi davrandığı bir süreçte insani yardıma ihtiyacından da bahsedemiyorsunuz ve insani yardım sürecinin izlenmesi ya da araştırılması da imkansız hale geliyor.
So, just a quick note, as I mentioned Gaza previously, when there is a humanitarian crisis in a region that a lot of governments and also some international NGOs actually don't look into directly, or don't actually work on the field, or try to just not see the reality there, like the case in Gaza, where there were very massive human rights violations happened and also still happening. In that context, the other problem is that having a research or to monitor the humanitarian aid becomes impossible, because first you have to see and define the problem After that, the humanitarian intervention and also the evaluating of the humanitarian intervention can be possible.
Thank you so much, Umut. And I'm just going to pass on to Kai then, if you could speak to some of the solutions or workarounds you've seen around the challenges specifically from a funder perspective.
Sure. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're approaching this, but recognizing that there is still more for us to do. And I would welcome challenges from the room when we get to the Q&A as to what we could do more and better. The first thing I think is that we have committed and embedded in our principles, firstly, shifting power and decolonization as key topics. Not to kind of repeat Marianne's call around the use of jargon, but we believe that only by committing at an organizational level to these things can we really move forward. And then practically, firstly, we've tried to, in our own work, involve local actors in both the shaping of some of our research calls and the selection of successful research consortium that we put together. This is something that I think we need to do better on moving forward. And actually, Marianne's point around looking at ecosystems in countries of research actors is an area that we want to move into and will do. But we do try to involve local organizations in the shaping and design and selection of research that we fund. The second thing, I guess, related is that events, previously we've held research forum conferences in the global north, and we know how exclusionary they are or can be. So last year our research forum was held in Kenya, and we did it in collaboration with a local organization. Going back to my proverb from before, it would have been much quicker to do that alone, but actually it provided a much better event by doing it together. Then the second area in terms of the grants that we do, and this speaks a little to Umut's point, we really try to create and support these equitable partnerships between not just big international organizations and local organizations, but also bringing local actors together. That takes time and effort. And we often start doing that by providing a bit of seed money so that they can begin to work together before any research actually happens. We then try to follow that up with capacity support where we can, but also provide the partnerships ways to measure how equitable those partnerships are. So really try to support throughout the lifetime of the research project those equitable partnerships that are so key to involving and getting the best out of every actor. We also try to fund the research publications, recognizing that if the role of local organizations isn't recognized, then that just perpetuates the challenges. And also speaking to Marianne's point about bringing peer organizations together, we try to do that, try to get grantees from different countries together so they can exchange and learn. And as a result, we've delivered more funding than previously directly to local organizations. Like I say, there is more for us to do. We recognize that. And we're really trying to ensure that the visibility of those local organizations is recognized throughout as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Kai. And maybe to add a few bits from, I guess, the INGO experience, or what we've tried to do around some of these solutions to the challenges that we've mentioned. I think we've been trying to think about, like, what does it mean to be an ally in this space? I think that's essentially, and if we know things are gate kept, we kind of see our role in trying to open the gates. And so I think there's a few areas that we've explored this, and honestly, it's still something we're learning with, and we're learning with the likes of Open Space Works and Chaos, who we've partnered with in the past. But I think one is sharing opportunities, like there is some money out there, but actually whether local organizations know about it in the first place is hard. So I think we see our role in sharing our opportunities. there's a piece around equitable partnerships, and Kai's spoken to that as well. But what does it mean for us as a HLA to be in an equitable partnership for research? And I think for us, that really means identifying essentially what it means to be having more of a support role that is led by the needs that have been identified and vocalized by a local actor themselves, not necessarily what we think that might be, but what we've been asked to support in. And then making sure that actually we're looking at that role of where we might unintentionally overstep, and making sure we're being very reflective. The research agenda should be led by a local actor, and the methods should be identified and designed by a local actor. So I think that's an area that we've been focusing on. And then I think the last one, actually, it's about the point that Mariana spoke to around something that came from the research that we did together, but it was about the role of linking and making sure that actually we're supporting to provide networks where we can as an international organization. And so that happened somewhat organically when we were doing it together. It wasn't necessarily intentional, but we've seen that that was quite useful. And so we're exploring some of the things like the HLA does something called the Humanitarian Exchange events. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that, but they are essentially convening spaces which are specifically for local actors. INGOs, UN agencies can be part of that, but it is very much a space for local actors to lead the agenda and space for that. And we haven't historically had a focus on research, but we'd really like to, because we see that as a really good space to actually make sure there's a session on research needs. And actually, if we could use those convening spaces to build a research agenda around the issue or the theme of the HX event, that could be quite a powerful way of setting a research agenda that's been designed and identified by local actors, and then making sure that we have some follow-up funding to begin the implementation of that research agenda. So just to be transparent, we haven't done that yet. This is in the plans, but we see it as one of the potential solutions around creating these networks and spaces for local actors. So we're at time, but maybe just to finish, I might want to just, Mariana, do you have any last points that you might want to say around what it is to be an ally, or if there are key things that you'd like us to take away in terms of being an ally to local actors in this space? And then we'll finish with that.
Yeah, I think at some points, probably I will be redundant to what was already mentioned by Kai, Umut, and myself, but just some points on what, as Tamara said, allies or those who want to support locally led research can do. So first, I would again start with funding. So please consider in your budgets not only funding for data collection, but for the whole cycle of the research, including what is happening before and after when the report is produced, how you can encourage also the communities to use the results of the research. The second one, probably one of the most difficult things to challenge your own epistemological assumptions, how you perceive and consider what is a good research, what are good methods, and what is feasible or not feasible to do while doing the research in the field. Yeah, I don't want to repeat the facilitation of peer connections between the researchers. That's already Kai and Tamara highlighted. Maybe the final thing that was slightly touched today, but what I would say is one of the cornerstones is also to deliberately acknowledge and credit local researchers in their different roles, even if they contributed with a very tiny advice or very tiny piece of the work that is done. We often see the reports which are no-name produced for big organizations with great logos, but actually not knowing who did the hard work in the field. So please name those people and acknowledge them, acknowledge their efforts that are done in the field.
Great, thank you. I'm not going to say anything else because I think that was quite a powerful way of finishing the panel question session. So now actually it's over to you. So we would love to hear if you have any specific questions for the panelists based on what you've just heard. But also, as I said, we really would love to hear if you have examples of times where locally led research has made an impact. Or actually, I think it would also be interesting to know where maybe a failure to do locally led research has undermined a research project's outcomes. And also if you have any examples of things that you've done that's contributed to this shift towards locally led research. So any particular solutions or things that you've been like, this really did make a difference, and you'd like to share it with the group. So yeah, does anyone have any immediate questions in the room? Otherwise, let me just check. There was one. Okay, great.
Thank you for the presentation and thank you for the information. You've talked about local actors, but I did not really feel talking about local researchers. And I participated in that research that Michel Locotte did on research. And I don't know if you have the same feeling that there is really colonialism in the contracts that are brought to local consultants. The contracts come from somewhere here in the West, and where the local contractor has the only right for pay, and the rest is only obligations. You produce, your name cannot appear. If you need to use the material for which you contributed, you have to request for permission. You have. I think that would be the beginning. We are not even starting from designing the project, but we should start to the contract we are bringing to people. And this is not only in research, it is everywhere, even for normal project implementation. The contract will come from somewhere, from a head office somewhere, and comes to the field, and you are just said to put on your signature. And I know they do it. It's done on purpose. It's one way exploring the suffered poverty. You know that if they refuse it, another organization will take it. And this is not fair. You may take another organization who would give you some kind of work, but then the quality is affected. Mm-hmm. I just want to contribute that. And finally, to say that I'm doing a presentation at 3:30 in the room, in the building nearby, where we'll be building on what count. And we'll talk about local leadership and innovation in measuring mortality. It's just almost a continuation of this. And we'll have to show exactly what else local actors can bring on the table. And that is really innovative. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's absolutely right. You're speaking to essentially this power dynamic, and it's not equitable. And I think you're speaking to, I guess, a key example of what you've observed. I don't know if does anyone have a reaction to that?
No, I don't have so much to react to this, I think, very powerful statement. You are completely right. That's what we hear from our colleagues, researchers in different contexts, that the whole way of contracting or procuring the local research is something that is depleting the resources in the countries where the research is done. So also adding to that, to the whole financial inequality, intellectual rights, intellectual property, usage of the research, the whole additional mental load and psychosocial burden that local researchers are experiencing while being, let's say, either secondary or directly imposed to trauma that is on the ground, and that is in no way considered in the way how the contracts are crafted and how the remuneration is planned and budgeted.
I think okay, sure.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to the panelists. I wanted to pick a bit on what Kai said about the challenges. I don't mean this as a provocation, it's a genuine reflection. I hope it's constructive. You were saying first about the perceived challenge, that it is more difficult to work with local actors, communication will be easier with an international, and so on, and how you don't think that is the case. But after you said that, I've been there thinking, but perhaps, especially for funders, shouldn't you be looking for what is difficult instead of trying to look for the local actors that might be easy to work with? I'm just afraid that in doing so, you are working with a local actor, but you're not really going to get the diverse perspective that you could by working with someone that communication might be more difficult. You see what I mean? So really about, rather than we talk a lot about bringing the margins to the center, to the system, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about taking the center, displacing the center, taking the center out of its comfort zone and going to the margins and meeting people there, right? So this was the bit on the first challenge. And then on the second, you said that you still see a value for international actors, and then the challenge is how to make sure that can work. It's a genuine question. What value do you see of international actors that you think a local actor could not provide, let's say? Yep. Thanks.
Great, and really good questions, and very happy for them to be provocative. I think on the first one around the perceived challenges, I suppose why I'm trying to say that is that I just don't think people are really aware of what it takes to work with local organizations. And I think it is true to say that, we use the term local organizations probably in the same way that we talk about local communities. We use one label to describe what is actually quite a diverse and varied group. And we shouldn't do that, and shame on us for doing so, because you're right. There are some organizations who, despite our best efforts, wouldn't pass our due diligence. That's the sad reality. I think we try to make it as easy as possible, and I think we capture as many organizations as we can. We do have some specific initiatives that try to go beyond that center that you rightly identify. And we should do more of those. So I totally accept your point, and I'm not really disagreeing with it. I suppose my emphasis was that a lot of organizations don't get past the assumption. And actually, I think if they did, they would realize that there are lots of organizations, perhaps not all, that they would be able to realistically work with. Coming to your second question, again, a good provocation. What is the value of international organizations? Let me give you one, although I think there might be others. The research that we fund, a lot of that is trying to ultimately shift policy and how international actors operate as humanitarians. And as a result, having organizations who, rightly or wrongly, have an easier opportunity to engage with them and to advocate on the basis of evidence can be really helpful. So even if we look around HNPW, there are lots of organizations who aren't here, who we want to be here. Our CEO is from Kenya. She can't get a visa to be here, right? So whether it's right or wrong, and we can talk about that separately, there is a role, I think, for international organizations in terms of advocacy and uptake of research findings and evidence, especially in certain parts of the sector. So that's not to say that there isn't a huge role for local organizations when it comes to uptake. And in fact, so much of the value from research happens, or the potential value can happen in countries and away from the international space. But there is a role, I think, in terms of policy advocacy, policy shifting, and that level of change that we do want to see in the sector that some international organizations might be able to do easier. Hopefully that answers, but happy to keep talking and receive more provocations. Thanks.
I think there was two here,
And
and then we do have some online, so we might take a few from online, but please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So this is Faiza. I'm one of the local NGOs and coming from Yemen, fresh. I have a couple of points, not a challenges. It's just about sharing, experience from different contexts. So maybe one of the gap of challenge that is not, I think, mentioned is about some of challenge of having a local lead research is in fragile context. It's linked to fragile educations. So the outcome of education is not really like a lot of people, or sometimes for Yemen example, we don't have a college or university about humanitarian development. So we don't have, a research in that area. And this is combined with, unfortunately, like poor investment in building the capacity of the local actors, NGOs in terms of doing research. There is no program to invest in that capacity because mainly the fund coming for 3 days, short training program where research need a kind of 3 months, 6 months, more deep. So more investment maybe can be helped in the fragile context where we need to build stronger national researchers. Another challenge, I think this is from donor perspective, is that one of the challenge to deal with local is about neutrality. So sometimes we feel that is local researchers can be not neutral when they share, the data or, especially when we have a political sensitivity. And a good example that is we had a collaboration because we are hosting the National NGO Forum in Yemen. We do have a collaboration with ICFA where they bring researchers and they do a kind of coaching together. So it's a kind of, reducing the risk that we face. Third challenge is about, unfortunately, if we want to have a local lead research, we need to have a local lead systems. So the current system is UN lead system, who is leading the systems, automatically bringing the local actors in the implementer level. So just we receiving data, we waiting the assessment, the analysis coming from the international actors, and just we implement what they say. So when we advocate for local lead research, we cannot, ignoring advocating to localize the system. If local actors in the position of planning and decision making, automatically they will be like in a position to lead the research. Final point from my side is, unfortunately, there is no linkage between research and project. So one of good experience that we have now with one of Germany fund that we develop a proposal. We spend 9 months in just doing develop the proposal, and this is funded process. So the linkage, the poor linkage between research and the project, and we do have a lot of master student, PhD doing a kind of research, but there's no kind of, let's say, national research hub who taking that research, encourage people to do research in humanitarian field, and how we use that is all information to encourage national student to create a pathway for their effort in research to be feeding the system. Thank you.
Thank you. And super interesting points. I would love to speak to you around the coaching for research bit, because this is something that we're specifically trying to explore at the moment in the HLA. So if you're not rushing off somewhere, please let me grab you at the end of this session. Great. I don't know, Umut, if you have anything to say around the poor investment of local actors, and because I know that was one of the points that you spoke to, and maybe something around what might be needed to build strong national researchers. Because I think this is something that we've been, like, the sector's been criticized for doing poor capacity strengthening, often quite short term. But what does it mean to do good capacity strengthening in this space?
Yani şeyi söyleyebiliriz. Bizim geçen sene yaptığımız Humanitarian araştırma aslında iyi bir örnek olması açısından önemli. Biz daha önce hem deprem sürecinde insani yardım desteği sağladık. Örgütümüz ve Ankara'daki diğer LGBT örgütleriyle yapımız değişti. Sonra da bu meselenin insan hakları boyutu üzerinden işte hukuki, sosyal hizmet değişim ve sağlık hakkına erişim açısından raporlamasını yapmıştık, izlemesini. Ee, Human şeyden
Sorusuna hiç yanıt değil. Bambaşka bir şeyden bahsediyorsun burada.
ama sorusunu
Kapasite nasıl
Evet.
gelişir diyor.
Kapasiteyi yerel örgütlere daha açık destek sunarak gelişebilir. Onların ihtiyaçlarını göz önünde bulunduracak. Çünkü yerel farklılıklar olabiliyor. Örneğin Türkiye'de kamu hiçbir veriyi paylaşmıyor. Kamu hiçbir veriyi paylaşamadığımızda elde ettiğimiz tek veri sivil toplum alanında yapılan araştırmalardan elde ettiğimiz veri oluyor. Örneğin işte bilgi edinme başvurularımız sonuç vermiyor veya işte afet bölgesiyle ilgili yaptıkları yatırımı kamu açıklamıyor ama biz şeyi biliyoruz. Bize gelen başvuranlar ve danışanlar üzerinden ihtiyaçları biliyoruz. Bunların kendisini araştırma boyutunun da desteklenmesi önemli. Bunlar olabilir. Onun dışında başka bir arkadaş şeyi söylemişti katılımcılardan bir araştırmacıların desteklenmesi sadece insani yardım örgütlerinin değil bağımsız araştırmacılar da desteklenebilir bu süreçte.
Uh, So one of the things that I may add is apart from funding and decision making and the power shift, it's actually about rethinking the dominant research norms, as Mariana mentioned, and we agree on that. I agree on that issue with Mariana. It's very vital to rethink the dominant research norms and jargons, and it can also help the capacity building of local researchers and institutions, because the prevailing norms of research in the humanitarian aid and development sectors are largely shaped by frameworks developed in well-resourced Western institutions. So these frameworks define what counts as valid evidence, which methodologies are considered rigorous, and how research questions should be formulated. However, adopting these standards uncritically can make research extremely difficult or even impossible in certain contexts. Like, for instance, in Turkey, public institutions do not share data transparently. Data on issues such as poverty is often communicated through political messaging rather than substantive data sets. Government announcements may state that a certain number of households received assistance or that a number of elderly people were supported, yet these statements rarely provide the detailed information necessary for rigorous analysis. Similarly, like when we submit requests through freedom of information mechanisms, we often receive no response. This means that researchers cannot access the data that would normally be required to verify findings or build evidence-based policy recommendations. So one thing to add apart from funding opportunities or to increase the capacity of independent researchers and also research institutions is that research norms must also be adapted to the political, institutional and social conditions of the countries in which research is conducted.
Thank you, Umut. So I think there's a piece there around, I guess, capacity strengthening, but also looking at the frameworks themselves and making them simpler or more appropriate, so it's not as complex as well for local researchers to implement the research itself. I'm going to take one question from online. So there's a question here around the convening spaces, and I think this is probably to the HLA, around actually whether the convening spaces could also be a space for uptake and application of research as well, not just on necessarily designing the research agenda itself. And I think the answer to that is very clearly yes. And I think it would be interesting if anyone has any other ideas around the convening space dynamic. This is something we're really exploring in the HLA. And as I said, it's not something we've done yet. So any ideas around that, please do come. But I think absolutely it's clear from the panel and from what we've researched ourselves in terms of the needs analysis that it's not just the research agenda. I guess this is what we're talking about today, but there is a whole other area around uptake and use of research that does need to be explored as well, and how to ensure that both local research itself is widely shared and disseminated so that it can be taken up, but then also the other way that local actors themselves are included in the uptake and dissemination of research.
I will just quickly jump in. So last year we did an experiment with having so-called research workshop in Ukraine for local researchers, which ended up with an interesting learning for me that people often need safe spaces to discuss tricky things they experience with in collaboration with their international partners, which is not deliberately can result in a deliverable from the workshop or anything, like learning something or doing something together. So just having the space to share the concerns or ask questions or having something like more a self-help group rather than learning space or networking space. But that's also something that we funded from our own resources and where we never found, let's say, external funding to facilitate and continue doing this. So the commitment from our side is to at least find resources for one meeting per year, which is already challenging.
Thank you. So I think we have time for one more question from the room, and then we'll go into maybe two if it's quick, but one for sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am Carolina Garcia from, I'm the national focal point of GNDR in Colombia. And I'm also a volunteer of the Geological Society of Colombia. And well, first I know, thank you very much because you make me reflect a lot about what research is. Usually we think that research is more from someone from an academical background and is basically about reporting findings. But then by listening, I reflect a lot of it. And it's like, yeah, it's you ask about some examples, and besides all the publications we have been doing and everything, I just wanted to share an example of what local research is important for me. We had some people in the field. We were implementing some early warning systems, and then we had the technicians in Germany analyzing the maps, so where the sensors could be placed, and we had architects designing the benches to protect the sensors so the people can use it. And we did all the workshops and we showed the people, but about the importance of local researchers, like what we call researchers, whatever that is trust for me. So in the workshops, we create a great environment. We check the maps and everything, but just because we have built trust when we were just talking outside, just sharing a coffee or whatever, some local people told us, you know what, the place that you select to place the bench is not good for anyone at the community, because if you place the bench there, that's a perfect spot for the criminal gangs to kind of check what is going on. So you won't create something to protect us, but the opposite. So that trust building is important. And another example is where we were doing some research on tourism, ecotourism in a high-risk area. We had a lot of what used to be poachers, like hunters, and we trained them so they could become the best kind of assistants for the biologic researchers, because they knew how to locate all the single species really, really fast. And when they realized that they were great researching at it, they stopped doing that and they transformed into it. So it's also, trust and empowering. And lastly, just an idea, GMDR, it's as many of you might know, we are a network of more than 2,000 organizations. And that could be great if we can support them, to show them that most of the organizations, they are all doing research. Called differently, but that's research. And if we show that, it will be just really, really powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've given me some things to think about. I think trust is obviously a key thing that we've known for a long time. And I think as INGOs, we've struggled with. And I think clearly this is a space for local actors and local researchers. I think the last point around your network, but actually questioning what is research, I think is a really interesting one. It's obviously something that's come out today, but it wasn't necessarily really intentional. So I think there is an element there around actually the language itself being a barrier. So do we want to think about actually showing that research is much broader and maybe expanding the actors who take space, who already are taking space in research, but maybe don't recognize it? I think that's an interesting one. So we are at time. Did you have anything to say?
No, I think we've seen one more hand. Maybe we can take this 2 minutes.
It depends. If people are happy to go over by a few minutes, we'll take one more question and then I think we'll do the closing remarks. Jen, do you mind helping? Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. So like I wanna say my question is like very short. So like I'm Connor from Bangladesh and my organization is working almost like 40 years in Bangladesh. So like for research, what we do, like we never got any funding for the research, but like if we do like any development research, like for the climate change or maybe water governance, what we do, like we make the research team. Me as a like development communication official, so I go and I lead the research and we make the report. And after that, when I like propose any like projects or something like that, then we use that data. So yeah, that is how the research works in our organizations in local partners for Bangladesh. But my question was like the topic was like the local humanitarian research, but for us, like we never talk about the humanitarian research in our local context, because all over the time when we like do any projects for the humanitarian perspectives, we always the implementing partners, and the projects was always like very short term. But you know, like when we do like 40 years for the humanitarian response, maybe the recovery, maybe the response, maybe the like anticipated reactions, so we always have some kind of different like knowledge based on the areas, based on the like situations, but we never have the opportunities to like work on that because if we get any kind of research, maybe we always have like someone from the like donor person or maybe the like grant maker parts who made the research, and we just saw the data, but they collect the data from our reports. But reports, you know, it always like made with the projects like achievements, right? But it is not always the like actual data that maybe we can show from the ground level. So I just wanted to like make this point in the table that yeah, for the specifically for the humanitarian research, we need like the separate funding from the local organizations so that we can like put the ground reality on the global area. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for contributing, and also thanks everyone for joining this panel. Before we close and go to the break, I want to get back to this a bit of participatory moment and then get maybe short feedback from you. Again, with this really old school method, just hands up. Is here anyone in the room who in this 1.5 hours changed his or her perspective on what is locally led research? Yeah, some hands there. Yeah, good. Very some not super high, but yeah, like here I am. Yeah, and yeah, is anyone here who got more convinced in the value of locally led research? Oh wow, yeah. Yeah, that's really something that we kind of envisioned for this session. And I think like we will have another QR code. So if anyone, maybe next one, I don't think that's the right QR code. Yeah. It is? Okay. So then if anyone wants to share with us any thoughts or ideas, what you want to implement after this session in your organizations regarding to locally led research, please use the QR code. But yeah, we know that we are late into the schedule. So if you don't have time, that's also fine. Thank you for being with us for today. I really appreciate that we touched these topics around the triad that Tamara started with, the resources, the power, and the language, and reflected a bit what we are putting into this. I appreciate the real examples from the countries where you are working, which brings us a bit outside of Geneva and really putting into the ground how can we do the research better and change the structural things that were mentioned, like contracts or payment conditions, to support local researchers. Thank you.